A very good evening to everyone present here. Namaskara from the land of Adi Shankaracharya, God's own country, Kerala. सर्वप्रथम आप सभी को हिंदी दिवस की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. I am highly thankful to Professor Mahendra Gaurji for giving me this great opportunity to present before you all this topic. It is very excellent initiative to organize this virtual foreign policy school. I am no expert in this field of international relations, just a learner. So I'll try to explain in as lucid manner as I can. The topic for today's conversation is India's foreign policy post 2014, challenges and way forward. So increasing globalization and interdependence between nations across the globe has enhanced the need for healthy diplomatic relations amongst all the countries of the world. Having a sound and strategic foreign policy is crucial for having a voice on the international arena, for effective trade and investment, and for achieving consistent domestic progress also. After India achieved independence in 1947, there was a dire need for us to have an independent stand as far as the foreign relations with the major superpower goes. On 26th January 1950, we adopted the Constitution, and which was a roadmap or a guideline on which our country was supposed to work from there on. In 1950s only, Nehru was the Prime Minister at that time, and the 5 principles of Panchsheel, the principles of peaceful coexistence, were first enunciated in an agreement on trade between the Tibet region of China and India. And its preamble stated that the two governments have resolved to enter into the present agreement based on the following 5 principles. So that's why it's called Panchsheel. Sheel is principles and Panch is 5. 5 principles are there that were used during those times. Nehruvian policies, foreign policy were largely dependent on these 5 principles. Mutual respect for each other's territory, integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence. These were the 5 principles. Panchsheel gave substance to the voice of the recently independent countries that were just coming out of the clutches of their colonial masters, and they were seeking space to consolidate their hard-won independence, and it provided for an alternate ideology which was dedicated to peace and development of all as the basis for international interaction among all the nations. Panchsheel was incorporated into the 10 principles of international peace and cooperation in April 1955 Bandung Conference of 29 Afro-Asian countries. Panchsheel tenets were also incorporated in United Nations General Assembly in 1957 by a resolution presented by India, Yugoslavia, and Sweden. In 1961, the Conference of Non-Aligned Nations in Belgrade accepted Panchsheel as the core principle of their movement, that was non-alignment movement. Non-alignment movement was formed during the Cold War as an organization of states that did not seek to formally align with any of the superpowers, either US or USSR, but they sought to remain independent or neutral in their stances. It has currently it has 120 members, 53 countries from Asia, 39 from Africa, 29 from Latin America and Caribbean, 2 from Europe, 10 international organizations as its observer, and 17 countries are acting as observers. So 5 leaders of the world from Yugoslavia, Egypt, India, Ghana, and Indonesia they all gathered and formed this non-alignment movement. And later on, other independent countries which were newly independent, they joined this force. The purpose of the non-alignment movement was enumerated in Havana Declaration of 1979 to ensure the national independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and security of non-aligned countries in their struggle against imperialism, colonialism, neo-colonialism, and their struggle against racism or all forms of subjugation. So during Cold War, this non-alignment movement, it played a very crucial role by stabilizing the world order and by preserving the peace and safety and security of these countries. Non-alignment movement did not mean a neutrality of state on global issues. Rather, it was always a peaceful intervention into the world politics. After the Cold War ended, a new phase arrived. In 1990s, the government introduced liberalization, privatization, and globalization, and our economy was put open, new markets were introduced. And now in 2014, what all changes are we seeing as far as foreign policy is concerned? So by Narendra Modi's election to the center, it was particularly very significant as it was for the first time in 3 decades that a single party won majority of seats to form a government at the center. Before this, only in 1984, Rajiv Gandhi won such majority seats. So it was very significant in this manner, this Trump. So Modi's Trump was also momentous as it was against the backdrop of prevalent corruption, scams, failure of nation's foreign policy, chronic economic distress that was there in the country, and the general sense of policy paralysis at the center. According to some foreign policy commentators, they think that paralysis was happening before this government came, and after this government was formed, a new vigor, new energy was pumped into the foreign policy arena. While the present government excelled in various fields of governance, it particularly stood out in designing a robust foreign policy. From shunning its non-aligned stance to asserting its identity on global platforms, to displaying zero tolerance towards terrorism emanating from its neighboring countries, to prioritizing its self-interest above conformity to the Western notions. India's foreign policy has undergone a remarkable and huge transformation under the dynamic leadership of the present Prime Minister. For decades, we have seen how India did not retaliate to Pakistan for its audacity of attacking and capturing Jammu and Kashmir in the last few decades, in 1948 and later on also. Or as we served the United Nations Security Council siege to China on a platter, and later on we misread China's intentions on Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh also. And that led to inevitable catastrophe, leading to 2 wars with China also. So, but now India's foreign policy has undergone radical shifts. We carried out surgical strikes across borders, both in East and West, to demonstrate our willingness to go beyond the conventional methods to deal with terrorism. India already has shown that we will not sit silent. If we are attacked, we will be retaliating. We are a new country and we will put our national interest at the fore. With Balakot airstrike, India has shown its assertiveness to put the national interest first before anything else. By staying away from the old strategies of strict non-alignment, Modi has paved way for stronger ties with great and middle-sized nations. India has ceased to remain a bystander and has actively participated in fostering and reinforcing global alliances that have elevated its role at the international stage. During the time of coronavirus outbreak also, India leveraged its power in vaccine manufacturing, and as a part of foreign policy diplomacy or vaccine diplomacy, it may be called, India exported 65 million doses of corona vaccine to more than 100 countries, which earned it the title of Pharmacy of the World. India also exported corona vaccines to such countries with which it didn't had any kind of diplomatic relations before, or whose embassies are not there in our country. So India truly exemplified that we are a whole nation, a whole world is, Vasudev Kutumbakam, and everyone is one big family with this. Our government has pledged to cut countries' emissions by net zero by 2070. It's such a big task. Being ourselves a developing countries, we are in such a dire need of fossil fuels, and we cannot think of cutting our carbon emissions. But for the climate change and the measure to curb it, India has set up this ambitious target, and it's a very praiseworthy start initiation by such an developing country. Even developed countries has not thought as far as India is thinking. India's face off with China in Doklam and Galwan Valley, it has given clear signals that India values its territorial integrity, and it will not shy away from using the military efforts to counter the aggression of China. So India has already shown that we will not sit back and watch. We will be retaliating when it comes to all the neighboring or border states. As soon as Narendra Modi he became Prime Minister, he chose Bhutan as the first country to be visited, and with that he showed that for him the neighborhood first policy would be adopted. Later on also he visited so many countries that were not visited by the head of the states from India for more than 30 or 50 years also. So he wanted to build up a network, a closer network of the countries, and that's why he tried to build closer ties with the heads of the state of the smaller countries also. Narendra Modi, from the look east policy, he turned into an act east policy, where he took various measures and various policy and trade agreements were made from the eastern or Indo-Pacific countries. Then India also joined various associations and organizations just to be part of all the major groupings, as India did not wanted to be a bystander. India joined Quad, where US, India, Australia, and Japan, these four countries were there, quadrilateral, and it is acting as a counterbalance to balance the Chinese aggression and to stop it from there. And sometimes Australia is quite assertive that should it remain in this Quad or not, because of these kinds of diplomatic relations. And also India is part of I2U2, where India, Israel, US and UAE are there. So India is also increasing its engagement with the Middle Eastern countries because of various diplomatic reasons. Now Charbar port in Iran, India has helped a lot to develop that. And in Afghanistan, India is doing the wheat diplomacy. It is as a humanitarian aid because of the agricultural crop failure there. India is supplying wheat, exporting wheat there. So India is engaging with all the kinds of countries, not only Middle East, not only the superpowers or developed countries, not only the weaker countries, not only the neighborhood countries, but every part of the world, India is quite dominating the scenario. It is reaching to all the platforms. India is also a part of Shanghai Cooperation, which is led by China. So that it is not thought that India is secluding China, or India is not engaging with China in building any kind of relations. So India is engaging with China, with US, with Australia, with UK, with Japan, all these superpowers, so that it can maintain healthy relations and it can play the diplomacy in its full form. India also hosted a landmark Indian African Forum Summit, which included 41 head of the state. It was a very important policy. It was a very important program that India hosted, and now as far as UK is concerned, India for the promotion of renewable sources of energy, India joined hands with the UK under the banner of One Sun, One Grid, One World initiative to harness the renewable sources of energy. So in such a manner, India is engaging with all the countries, all the nations to build up proper relations. Previously, India was acting as a non-aligned nation where to be engaging with any particular country, it was considered that we are favoring to some country and not favoring to other. But now we are engaging on all levels so that we can benefit, and we can be benefited from them, and we can benefit other countries also from that. Now, what are the challenges that are that has been on the global arena? What global order is emerging in the contemporary times? That is very essential because lots of issues are happening around the world, and they definitely have a very positive or negative effect on the foreign policy. So the world has again moved towards bipolarity, by the US on one side and China and Russia is on the other side. War-torn Syria is a prime example of such a conflict where both US and Russia, they are asserting powers to gain control of the region. The escalating tensions in Indo-Pacific regions due to China's assertion, as we have seen through Quad or military, through naval exercises. The Quad was asserting power in the Indo-Pacific region. So because of the China, US is acting as a counterweight to check the Chinese expansionist policy. We have seen that recently, Nancy from the US Senate, she came to Taiwan, she visited Taiwan. It was just to showcase that US is against any kind of expansionist policy that China is heading. Large scale migration, we have seen large scale of migration because of the war that is happening in the Middle East countries, and all those affected people, they are migrating to Europe and Asia due to all such problems because of the ethnic conflicts that is happening in the region or the unstable regimes that they are. So this is also a very important and relevant issue that is happening, and because of this, dire consequences has been facing because of these things. Now, as far as the global climatic change is concerned, we are all able to see that so many species of plants and animals, they have already become extinct or they are on the verge of extinction because of this climatic change. And we ourselves are feeling that this is the time of September and we are still feeling very warm because of the climatic change. Otherwise, this time of the year, it should be pleasant. So it is affecting everyone. Now, as catastrophic disasters are happening everywhere because of these climatic and environmental changes that are happening. Now, changing US policies, prevalent terrorism around the world. We have been seeing various small incidences of terrorism around the world. Even in most developed or European or US country, US also, we are seeing that small acts of terrorism are happening there as well. So nobody in the world can remain unaffected because these are all global issues. So everyone will have to find a solution to tackle with these issues. Nuclearization of the Middle East is another issue, because Middle Eastern countries previously they were not having the nuclear power, but now they have rapidly becoming nuclear powers, and which is very crucial for other developed countries, and it can be a disastrous move to for them to have that. Next is formation of multiple regional economic groupings that are happening, like TTP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, that is a trade agreement between 12 countries, and RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership between Asian countries. Uh, it's a kind of a free trade agreement between the partners, and it's recently signed into 2022 only. So such kinds of regional groupings of the regional association or organization are happening. With that, the major or the global powers like WTO or World Bank, they are fading up, as they were the multilateral bodies. They were hosting a group of all the countries they were able to include. But now regional corporations, regional economic groupings are happening, so that regional trade can be enhanced with that. So multilateral bodies are fading away because of this. India needs to strike a good balance between how it cooperates with the smaller countries and how it acts with the major superpowers. So a kind of balance needs to be maintained, so that India does not seem to be biased within the countries. India has a huge storehouse of soft power, which can be used to channel India's interest across the border. India has such a huge diaspora around the globe, and they are all ambassadors of India's culture and rich heritage. So India can use that soft power around the world for the acting as a diplomatic move. Yeah, we have witnessed that wherever our prime minister is visiting, whichever country he is visiting, people are greeting him on the airports. They are standing on the roads, especially the Indian diaspora there. So uh, the name and fame of our country is growing by leaps and bounds because of the dynamic leadership of the current prime minister. We are celebrating World Yoga Day all because of the soft power diplomacy that is being played. Ayurveda and all our ancient scriptures, they are put at the fore of the world because of the diplomacy that is happening. And multilateral efforts can be made in the field to strengthen India's national interest, so that India can consolidate its position worldwide. India is becoming a leader. India's economic growth is quite stable now. India is fifth largest economy in the world now, and uh, we can clearly see that India is on a path to progress. I thank Professor Mahendra Gorji for giving me this opportunity to interact